Hello and welcome to Friday Art with me, Kate Field at the Alternative Art School. In today's tutorial, I'm going to dive straight into the world of abstract art using one of my favourite mediums, collage. This session is playful and intuitive, but also grounded in a little bit of art theory. So together we'll explore how colour, line and texture can guide your creative choices, and it can help us to create work that feels rich and expressive and uniquely yours. Now, you don't need any fancy materials, just a selection of different sorts of papers, some scissors, some glue, and your creative spirit. So whether you're working in an art journal or on loose pages or building a larger composition, this is a space to experiment and make joyful messes and learn a little along the way. So, perfect for all levels, especially if you're a little bit curious about creating abstract art, but you don't know where to begin. So, if you're ready, let's go. Well, I do hope you are well. I have still got a little bit of a cough, so apologies if there's a bit of spluttering going on. For this, I'm going to be using some neutral colours for my collage base, and then I'm going to be putting in some other colours and lines and things like that. So, as I said in the introduction, we're going to do a little bit of art theory. And we're going to be looking at the formal elements in art, and depending on where you look, there's 7 or 8 or 9 formal elements. Now for me, the formal elements are colour, line, texture, form, shape, pattern and tone. So 7. Other people put in things like composition. And I can see where they're going with that. But for me, there's just the 7. We are going to be focusing on texture. We're going to create texture with our collage. And we're going to use line. And we're going to use colour. And they are going to be the main ones. But pattern will probably creep into it as well. There's lots of overlapping with the formal elements. So basically, every piece of art that you see will have at least 1 or 2 of the formal elements. And when we have an understanding of these, we can take our art to another level, which I think is rather nice. There we go. And as I've said to you before, I see you as my students. So you are my lovely art students in the Alternative Art School. So if you're new and you're thinking, who is this woman? You are very welcome. And I was a school art teacher for a very long time, and I taught in colleges. I was head of art and design at college, and now I run classes and workshops where I live here in the southwest of England, for adults and children and young people. So I am just tearing up some of these. So these are all just sort of leftover bits. They're printed pieces. I will quite often use collage, painted collage pieces, and I might do that a little bit later. We'll see how we go. There's bits of old sheet music, bits of damaged books that were going to be thrown away, all of that kind of thing. So just getting those ready. I've got some old map as well. That's rather nice, isn't it? But can you see when the colours are all together, they're all muted, all neutral colours. I'm going to be working in my sketchbook. You could work on a separate sheet of paper if you want to, and then I'm just using a glue stick. You could use double-sided tape or PVA glue or whatever. As I've said before, I get in a bit of a muddle with double-sided tape. I get in enough of a mess with ordinary glue. It's just one of those things. It doesn't really work for me. So I am going to be working in my sketchbook, and I'm going to start off by dividing this space into squares. So I've divided this double page into a series of squares and rectangles of a different sizes. And the reason I've done that is because I want to try out different sorts of composition and different sorts of ideas. But all of them on this double page are going to be these neutral colours. And I'm just looking at some of these textured shapes. I like to tear. Sometimes I'll do some scissors. I will cut with scissors. But for the moment, I think I'm just going to keep tearing. And I'm going to start off with just the first one. And the idea is that we'll put a little piece of everything into each one, and then that will give a cohesion to the whole page. And so some pieces will be larger and some will be smaller, and we're just going to have a little bit of a play of putting these together. And as I've said before, if you've watched me before, you'll know this. Using collage is a really good way to practice composition. Composition is just how something is placed on a page. And there's lots of different ways to compose pieces. And you just need to try them out and see what works for you. There we go. So a lot of Western art is based on the idea of thirds, which when we go on to do the line bit a little bit later, I'll explain that a bit more. But other cultures will have compositions that are based on squares or circles, starting from the middle and spreading out. So it's not that one is right and one is wrong. It, as always, depends what you want. And that's why putting these together in different ways can be really helpful and really useful. So I'm not sticking anything down yet. I'm just putting together my pieces and seeing where my imagination is going. So I'm going to spend probably 10 minutes, 10-15 minutes putting these on, layering them up, and then I'm going to come back and show you what we do next. So I have stuck all of these down. Just lift that up a little bit so you can see. And what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to use a pencil. This is a colouring pencil, a Faber-Castell, but you could use an ordinary graphite pencil if you want to. That's, it doesn't matter. And what I'm going to do is just to go around the edges. You could use a ruler for this. I'm just going to do it freehand because I want this kind of slightly jaggedy look, I think. I might do straighter edges in a later one. So these are our first lot of ideas, and in a sketchbook or a journal, this is the place where we can try out ideas. We don't just kind of dive in with the first idea and then that's it. That's not how we develop as artists and as creatives. And so what I'm going to be doing is doing a few sort of experiments on these, and then work on something a little bit bigger as a development. So we're going to do that. And the thing with abstract is we can base it on whatever we want. It's not representational of anything in particular. So with abstract art, we can work on feelings and emotions, for example. For this, I'm I'm not actually feeling anything at all at the minute, so, but I just want to enjoy the process. Now I'm just going to block in some of the shapes. So shape is another one of the formal elements, and we can have the geometric shapes like squares and circles and triangles, but we could also have abstract shapes, and that's what these are going to be. So I'm just shading in. You could go over the top of some of the papers that you've done already. So this is just a very dark grey. It's keeping in with the neutral colours for this one. A little bit later in this tutorial we are going to be using different colours, but for this we're just going to use neutral, and I like working with neutral colours because I think we can get some, we can focus on the sort of shape and the textures, I think, more. But as those of you who've watched me before know, I do like a little bit of neon, and that might pop in. It might just pop in. Let's just do this bit here. Can you see what's happening now? That they're kind of coming together as an idea, which I quite like. Quite liking what is going on here. And you see the difference between this page and this page. Still using my pencil, I'm now going to break up some of these designs. Now, when I was talking about composition, I was talking about the rule of thirds. And what that means is that we divide, let's take this one, we divide it in to thirds. So we don't just kind of lop it down the middle. And there's an aesthetic to the rule of thirds. So I'm just going to put in a line that's, it's not a straight line, it's a kind of slightly curved, breaking that into 2/3 and 1/3. And when we do that, we can sort of play with the composition. And when I say play, that is exactly what I mean. I want you to try things out. The advantage of just sort of building something up on a little space like this one, this little one, is one, we can do it really quickly, but also we don't get bogged down with things, so we can just try some things out. You know, what happens if I just shade in a bit? What if I go from dark to light, and that leads me into the next bit of art theory, which is tone. So tone is just basically going lighter to darker, darker to lighter. And we can do that with a colouring pencil by pressing hard and pressing light. We can do it with paint by adding white or black or more water. So it's sort of lots of different ways of doing that, but we can also do it by breaking up lines. So the lines closer together, more dense, and then we spread them out. So I've done my first little experiment there. I'm not really sure about that. It's okay. But again, it doesn't matter at this point. We are just trying out ideas. Now, I've just used a pencil for that, but yeah, we could also use acrylic pen. Let's just go in with a with an acrylic pen. Let's go on to this one. Again, let's do the thirds thing again. As soon as we start to put in a horizontal line, we start creating a landscape. We just do. That's just what happens. And we can put in various marks. Again, I'm just doodling, really. I'm just seeing what that might look like, and whether that's something that I might take further, which I might. So I am going to just sort of have a bit of a play with each of these. Let's just put in some curves. Again, this is dividing it in thirds again, thirds on the diagonal. What happens when we put in these ideas? Is that going to create something interesting and exciting? Quite like that. Got this little one here. What happens if I just go around the edge of what is there and then do some contours like that? So I'm going to have a bit of a play just using my grey colouring pencil and a black, and then we're going to go in with perhaps a biro, might do something with a biro, and then we're going to take an idea and develop it further in a slightly different way. So the next thing is using black and white pages from magazines, this quite sort of glossy paper. You could use black and white images from a newspaper as well. And then, similar to the collage tutorial I did a couple of weeks ago, just torn up the pieces and then just stuck them on to just a piece of lined, just cheap paper. And so I've stuck it all down, so there's no edges that are sticking up. And then what I'm going to do is to flip this over, same as I did before. And again, you can just sort of rub down some of that. And then I'm going to cut out some shapes. And in the previous collage tutorial, I was cutting out sort of organic shapes to create flowers and things like that. This time I'm going to be a little bit more angular. And I'm going to use stencil. Oh, if I can get it here. This stencil is so old, I've had to kind of repair it a few times. So what I want to do is, I'm just going to draw around some of these. So I want to cut out some circles. You could use a hole punch if you've got one of those big punches. I did have one, but I've used it so frequently, it's now broken. I'm going to do some triangles. We can cut out a few triangles like this. Ooh. So sort of cutting out sort of geometric shapes. But you could also do sort of freehand shapes as well. Some kind of thin. You could do rectangles and squares as well. And you could do kind of wonky pieces as well. So the idea is we're going to cut out a whole load of shapes from this piece, and I'm going to cut it out with scissors. Let's just grab those. And the whole point of doing it on the reverse side is that it means that we don't get get confused by the imagery, and we don't get influenced by the image on the other side. So we're never quite sure what it's going to look like, but you get some of these shapes. So I'm going to cut all of those out, and then I'm going to create a composition in my sketchbook. So I'm back in my sketchbook. I'm actually on the last couple of pages of this sketchbook. I've cut out all the shapes. So some are kind of ordinary little shapes. Some others are a little bit more crazy, but that's okay. And what I'm going to do now is start to put them together just on one page. And again, just take your time. Now, with some of these, I think, like especially with the circles, I'd quite like a ring. So I'm just going to fold it in half and then just cut it around like that. And obviously that will give me a smaller circle, but it will also give me a ring. And once you've kind of cut them up, you can then cut them up further and just move things around the page. See what you like. Spread them out first of all. Have some gaps, some white space, and then you can start overlapping and seeing what happens then. And if it's just all looking far too messy and untidy, that's when you can start to just play with the shapes. Perhaps just sort of move some of them out. I do like this big triangle, so I'm definitely going to have that one. I like this ring as well. Quite like the idea of overlapping. Again, I'm putting some thoughts down and see what happens when I move things around. Give yourself time to just play with this. Start overlapping some of them. So don't stick anything down yet. We're just, just trying out some ideas. Now, on this page, I don't know whether you can see, but some of the marks from the previous page, I will show you, have come through. So, I was sort of playing around with this one. So what I'm going to do on here is to create a collage like we did before, with some newsprint and some of the maps and neutral colour, and then I'm going to put these on top. And again, it's just another way of playing with an idea, taking an idea and running with it really, and seeing what happens. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to stick some of these down and I'll be back in a moment. Well, here we are on the double page. So I put some newsprint down and then stuck these shapes on, and then this one is, I quite liked this sort of layering and some strips and things like that. So what I'm going to do now, because there is something missing, and what I want to do is to add a little bit of colour, but I'm going to keep to the neutral colours, and I'm going to be using some watercolour paints. You could also use colouring pencils as well to do this, but I'm going to do it with some watercolour paint, and I'm just going to show you again just another idea of what you could do. And my whole aim in in this whole series that I do with collage, and with all the other ones as well, is to give you ideas that you can then do what you like with. So I am using brown. The brown on this one is actually quite good, but I am mixing it with purple. So brown mixed with a bit of purple to have a grey. And thinking about the thirds again, I'm just going to do a line, quite kind of a curved line in the watercolour just to block off some of the background, and you'll see what happens, because just the energy starts to change a little bit, and I think it starts to become a little bit more interesting. But again, this is why it's so important to try things out in your sketchbook, because sometimes we can discover something new and quite unexpected, and that's wonderful, isn't it? It's so good when we can do that. There we go. I do like using brown and purple mix to create a grey. It's a little bit softer than just using black and white, for example. Just adding a bit of water just to move the paint around a little bit. You see what happens, I'm just creating a bit of a sort of softer background. So taking this idea, I'm still using my made up grey, just a little bit more pigmentation, and I'm going to put in another line up here, and I'm going to just go above the line. You can really see the purple in this one, can't you? There we go. So you just move the paint around. I like mixing up my media. I like using collage with paint, with colouring pencils, with acrylic. I think it's fun. So can you see how that one is sort of coming together? I think it's quite interesting. I think I'm just going to leave that for the moment. I might come back to it. I'm now going to go on to this one. And with this one, again, I'm going to stick to my neutral colours for the moment. Just sort of mixing the brown with the purple. Do a similar sort of thing. This time I'm going to break up the space vertically. Just go round my cutout shapes. Again, it's just blocking some of this. The paint will react differently because it's on newsprint, which is very absorbent. And it might go a bit blotchy, but actually I think that's okay. I think we can cope with a bit of blotchy, can't we? Let's do that a little bit down there. We'll have to use a little bit more water because the paper is so absorbent. But I do actually like that colour. Let's just add a little bit more brown. Let's just take this one this way. Yeah, and you see just how absorbent that paper is. There we go. Having to use a lot of water to move the paint around. So it just looks a little bit scrappy at the minute, but that's okay because that's just given me another idea. This is what happens. I'm going to do some mark making like I did in the previous tutorial, if you caught that one. Add a little bit more purple, I think. And then I'm just going to use the brush really lightly to do some scribbles. Now this creates an texture. Texture isn't just about how something feels, so rough or smooth, that kind of thing. Texture is also something that we can produce in 2 dimensions on the page, and we do this by, for example, mark making, and that's what we're doing here. I'm not sure about this. It's okay. I do like the colour though, and this is the thing. When you're working in your sketchbook, there might be aspects that you like and aspects that you think, no, that didn't really work. and that's okay. That's absolutely okay. I'm just going to leave that to dry for a bit because I've now got another idea that might be quite interesting, and I do like what's happening here. This won't take long to dry. I can say it's very, very absorbent. I'm going to go in with my acrylic pen. And again, I'm not sure whether this is going to work or not, or whether it's just going to be too much. I'm just going to go over these. Actually, that could work. So thinking about, let's just go back to some of the things I did on here. Let's do some of those on this piece and see if we can make it a little bit more interesting. I do like lines. Again, formal element of line, wiggly line, straight line, curved line. You could use a ruler and do very, very straight lines, and that would give a different effect as well. You can see that the pen's not working very well because the paper's still a little bit wet. But you could also use charcoal. That would be good. Charcoals and chalks could have very interesting effect. This is becoming a little bit more interesting. So it's given me another idea. Of course it has. I'm going to go in now. I'm picking up on the purple. Just going to stick to the purple. I'm going in with the Posca pen. You could use a felt tip pen. I don't know whether this is going to work. Might be too much. Let's just do some block. Thing with an acrylic pen like this one is that it will completely cover the text, which is what I wanted to do. Just round that circle, and let's just do another one that's round this bit of the triangle. Just again blocking that out. But if I was to do this exercise again using bright colours in the magazine, it would look completely different. And this is why it's really good to have an understanding of colour theory and other bits of art theory, because you can let yourself kind of experiment a little bit more systematically rather than just diving in and doing something quite randomly. Quite liking this, actually. Quite liking these blobs of purple. Bringing those in like that. I like the text coming through the paint and then the obliteration of the paint. And I'm thinking this triangle here perhaps needs to have a straight line. Let's see what happens if I put a completely straight line in there over the top. See, it will just look different, but that could be quite good. So please don't be afraid to try things out, because if it doesn't work out how you want it, then you've learnt something, haven't you? You've learnt something that you don't like. But I'm all for happy accidents. It happens all the time. And then with these kind of like long bits, I'll do a few more there. Kind of link the piece together. So there we have it. We've got, let's go back to those first ones. These experimental pieces using collage neutral papers, and then over the top with a marker pen or a pencil. But imagine if you were to go in with some really bright colours, what might happen then? And then, here, what else might we do? We could go in with a biro and do some textured pieces. We could go over the top of the acrylic with another acrylic pen, something like that, or some more collage, or we can start building it up. So I've done a little bit more on this one. Actually really enjoyed doing that. That was great fun. But you can see I've just added some more marks really. And then moving across to this one, I just did some contour lines, so it still has a bit of a landscape feel, I think. Well, I do hope you enjoyed it, that you've created a wonderful mess. And I hope to see you again soon. If you'd like to see some more, check out this one, because you'd like it. And I'll see you next time. Bye bye.